Welcome back to Cloud Wars Live, where we're talking about the digital revolution taking place all around us, with particular emphasis on the changes that the pandemic has woven into that whole interesting tapestry over the last 5 or 6 months. Our guest today is one of our monthly digital all-stars, Bonnie Tinder, who's the founder and CEO of Raven Intel, which does some remarkable research helping to understand what the customers of all this great technology, what they're experiencing, how they feel about it, and the partnerships that they deploy to try to get as much business value out of these projects as possible. Bonnie, welcome back. Always a pleasure to see you.
Thanks so much for having me. Great to be here.
Yeah, Bonnie, by the way, love your new office here, at least for this episode. It looks good.
Well, after listening to Wayne's interview earlier this week, I had to up my game, and so recommend that podcast for anybody who hasn't listened to them. I took away some great tips, including my new office here for recording.
No, it looks wonderful, wonderful. So, Bonnie, as we get started here, I want to ask. So, you're advising. Let's say you're advising me. I come in and I say, Bonnie, I've got this big digital transformation product. I've talked to people from all over the company about it. I've got everybody's buying. I think I really understand what's going on here. But my CFO is a real hard ass. And I think, he or she is going to really put me through the ringer on this one. Do you have any tips for how I might be able to present this in a way that is seen in a positive light by the CFO?
Mm-hmm. Well, I think, spending money in the era of COVID-19 is not a popular topic, no matter how good the project that you're selling is and how important to the organization it is. Every expenditure in this era that we're in is being scrutinized. And I think the way that you sell your CFO on the project can make or break the viability of you doing it in the short term. And I think it's really important to put yourself in the CFO's shoes and to really understand what they care about first before you start selling anything.
Bonnie, what you were just describing there, right? It's that spending money is not an easy thing to do these days. And we all, I think, have experienced or certainly seen a lot of things ourselves about why that is the case. So as you build into this, it'll be interesting to hear you talk about maybe here are some of the approaches that will sort of immediately get you on the road to nowhere versus the better ways to sort of pitch these things that you finding from the extensive work that you do with enterprise customers. What is getting people not only to get the okay from the CFO, but in some cases, sort of the passionate support of the CFO.
Yeah, and you want that passionate support. You want that executive sponsorship because it's that sort of leadership from the top that really helps create some good momentum for these projects as well. So not only do you want to get the approval for the project, you really want to get the endorsement as well. And as you said, there's some really good ways to do that, and there's some ways that are not going to work effectively. I think the number one thing that you should do before you have that conversation with the CFO is really walk a mile in their shoes. So put yourself in their position. And, as you know, CFO is the, money steward of the company. They are the one responsible to protect and grow the assets of the company and ensure compliance. But they take a really, strong seat at the strategic planning table, and they can help influence the direction of your project and the funding for your project, certainly. So they can use their purse strings and selectively drive initiatives. But they're not going to do that unless there's a very clear-cut sort of outcome from the project. So once you can sort of understand, okay, so the person that I need to really win the heart and mind of is cares about the numbers. really to frame your business case around that, I think is important. And I think there's four main areas that make a good business case. Number one, it's starting with the business problem that you're going to solve. Number two, it's clearly defining the project plan and the scope. So how does it solve the problem you defined in number one? Number three is to make the project bigger than you. So the wider that you can get in the organization and the more functions you can impact, the greater receptivity you're going to have. And then finally, and this is an obvious one, but you want to bring the right technology to the table and the right partner as well. I mean, that's the obvious one in a digital transformation, because they're very system oriented. But all of the great technology, all the great partnership in the world is not going to mean anything if you haven't really cared for and really well-defined points 1 through 3, the former areas. So I think it really comes down to those four main things to build that strong business case.
Yeah, Bonnie, I love those. I think each of those four is so good. And I know in a moment you're going to have a chance to go into a little more detail on each of those. The one that, as I mentioned, that I really jumped out at me was the one it's more than about you. So if I'm sitting in the CFO's position, or as you have recommended, anybody making a proposal like this, put yourself in the shoes of the CFO. If somebody comes in and says, hey, this is really urgent, this is top priority for the company, yet it only affects 10 or 15% of the company. I mean, you are giving the CFO on a golden platter a reason to say no, right? Because this isn't a time for incremental investments and time-consuming projects that are only going to have a limited impact on the company. So I think I'm eager to hear your points for each of those four areas, but in particular that one. And also, Bonnie, I love the idea, one of the things you've done with some research about this, and in addition to your own thinking, that you have actually read an article from a CFO of a pretty big and fast growing company about how she evaluates proposals that are being made to her. So turn it over to you and let us know what you think about the approach that CFO takes, and also how that affects the thinking of each of those four key points you've brought up.
Yeah. So, this last week, I read an article from the CFO of ServiceNow, actually, about how she evaluates projects that are brought to her desk in terms of their viability. And so much of what she was saying in terms of, how she greenlights projects, I think were so relevant to, really, every digital transformation sort of internal sale, if you will. So I think, ServiceNow definitely is on the minds of a lot of CFOs right now. A lot of them are evaluating that product internally. But I thought it was really interesting the way that she herself looks at projects that come across her desk. So definitely she's walking a mile in her customer shoes as well. So definitely recommend that article. And I think a lot of what I just mentioned is echoed by the way that she looks at projects. But the point that you sort of recognized about, it's more than about you. I think the broader that you can help solve a problem, and the more impacts across the business that you can show, I think that's going to help strengthen your business case. Most of the time, these digital transformation projects are cross-organizational, and they integrate many pieces together. So the more that you can show those integration points, and pre-built integration points, always a good thing, because those integrations are a sticky wicket, but the more integration that you can show throughout the business, not only with the technology, but functionally as well, I think that really helps tie the business case together for sure. and it shows really a focus on a larger problem than just your particular function.
Bonnie, that I think is such a critical point. What you're saying there about the integrations. Yes, there's got to be some mention of integrating the applications or the data sets, but the bigger thing is this will not only integrate the processes, it might give us the foundation on which to build new and better and more valuable processes.
That's right.
So you also then were talking about, in some ways, the project blueprint, the path to business value. What are some of the things that should be focused on in there?
Mm-hmm. So, as much as you want to, clearly define what the business problem is up front, you want to be able to articulate the path to solving the problem. Sometimes that's known as the project blueprint, but the things that your CFO are going to care about are, number one, how much time is this going to take and at what cost? How many people are involved on the project and how much time is going to need to be dedicated to the project versus, in addition to their full-time job. What we look at Raven Intel is, the project scope itself. So, who else is involved? So a lot of times you're going to have third parties, consulting groups come in and be working alongside the team as well. So what is the effort required externally to get to that end state as well? And the more specific that you can be about that blueprint, the better. So, how quickly, not only is the project going to come to completion, so what's your go live date and things like that, but what's the speed to value? Because, we know in implementations of software, that's really just the tip of the iceberg. That's the beginning. How quickly is it going to, once you go live with that software, actually start delivering on the value that that was anticipated? And sometimes, that's early in the process, but in many cases, like particularly in HR, you might have to go through a full year cycle within HR to see the true value of the system. And it's not just HR, it's any one of these large enterprise systems. So it's you really want to spell out what that time frame is. So not only what the project time frame is, but what the time to value is, because that goes into the return on investment as well.
All right.
Yeah, go ahead.
Bonnie, we're just going to take a second here for a word from our sponsor, BMC. In a world that's changing faster than ever before, the biggest challenge for businesses is creating fabulous customer experiences. That objective requires actionable insights and real-time agility from one end of your business to the other. At BMC, they call this the autonomous digital enterprise, and they've put together a set of solutions to help you anticipate what's coming, adjust accordingly, and acknowledge those changes from end to end. To start your journey to the autonomous digital enterprise, visit bmc.com/ADE. Sort of echoing some of those notions, right, of end to end there, Bonnie, you've laid out a number of these essential points that must be made to the CFO. And I guess, long gone are the days, thank goodness, of people coming in and saying, well, here's a project. It's going to take somewhere between 2 and 3 years. I'm not exactly sure because there's XYZ variables and it's going to cost somewhere between this amount and that amount. We're not sure. But in 18 months, we'll come back to you and give you a progress report, right? My guess is not too many CFOs are going to give that with the green light these days.
If they do get the green light, they have way too much money to work with. So yeah, I think the more tangible, predictable cost that you can bring to the table, the stronger your business case is going to be. And these large digital transformations, I think despite everybody's best efforts to define them up front, there's always going to be changes. Best laid plans, there's always going to be some bumps in the path, and not always are going to go exactly as expected. On the other hand, I think if you have the right framework in place, you're going to avoid those unexpected twists and turns along the way, to the best of your ability. And, I think the due diligence that you do up front in the pre-plan is actually going to help your ability to accelerate a time frame later on. And then, working with a good partner, externally in a lot of cases is going to help you land on the right questions to answer, to make sure that you're, sort of defining that project scope in a way that's not going to have a lot of, again, unexpected events that happen. So I would say that, those are the things that you really need to be looking at is that pre-project plan process. I mean, the other thing that I can't stress enough is and a CFO is looking at this as any business leader, is who is going to lead the project internally? How strong are they? And how committed are they to sticking with that project for the long term? And, regardless of the technology that you're using and the partner and all of the great things that you're going to define up front in terms of process and blueprints and all that great stuff, it's going to rely on people. At the end of the day, these projects are carried out by people, project leader, project team, and then typically an external project team as well. And if you have a weak leader or you have a weak, team that's not dedicated or has lots of turnover throughout the process, the results are usually going to be iffy. So, in that, in this section, which I would call articulate the path to value, really making sure that you have the right team in place. And by team, I'm talking about individual players who are committed for the duration of the project, even sometimes contractually, to make sure that you don't have these people churn issues that really can take and put a monkey wrench in the best laid plans.
Yeah, and Bonnie, if I'm the CFO and somebody comes in, presents a plan, asks who's going to be the leader, I receive a name from them about who the leader is going to be, and with some pretty modern software these days, the CFO in that conversation could type that person's name in and understand, where does that person sit relative to his or her peers in the organization. And if you see that this is a B or C player, why should, if you, the project sponsor, are not interested enough or committed enough to put a superstar on it, why the heck should the CFO then stick the company's money out for this as well? So that seems like one of those things. If you don't have a superstar on it, why should any of the other stuff matter?
Without a doubt, if the project is big enough and worth doing, it's worth putting your A player on it.
Yeah. Bonnie, I had a couple questions I wanted to ask you. One is, you mentioned a moment ago, like in the articulating the path to business value, the significance and the importance of, if it's appropriate for the business to have a great partner involved there. That's one of the things that Raven Intel does, right? And could you talk just a little bit about the sort of service you offer for that?
Yeah, absolutely. So we look at consulting firms. So those third-party groups that have a specialty implementing enterprise software. Sometimes they're referred to as SIs, or systems integrators. But we look at them in the lens of, from a customer's perspective. So our site has a whole bunch of peer reviews of those consulting firms written by customers who have gone through projects with them. And what I would say is the best predictor of future success on a project with a consulting firm is to look at what's their previous record of customer success. And that's what Raven Intel is about, is gives customers the tools to look in and see, how well did they deliver projects for other customers. And we look at some very empirical measurements on a project to say, was this a success or not? It's general things like overall satisfaction, but was the project delivered on time? Was it delivered on budget? Did the team change? Was it scoped properly up front? And we have about 15 KPIs that we look at that you, if you're looking at a consulting firm, can actually go in and read the experience of other customers as well. And what I would say is every digital transformation project is different. And so, there's variability, across the board. On the other hand, if you look at a consulting firm and you look at multiple projects, we see patterns. And it really goes back to what's the overall sort of heartbeat of a consulting firm internally? How are they empowering their employees and training their consulting teams to deliver consistently on projects? And so we help customers see who's doing the best at that, and help them make a wise decision independently about whether they should choose a consulting firm or not.
Okay. Bonnie, that's a great resource to have out there, which Raven Intel offers, because I would suspect most companies don't have this sort of built-in knowledge of, partners around the world for sophisticated projects, especially, as you say, because each one is different. Each one is going to have shifting priorities as it gets up to that final approval date. Then, Bonnie, the other question I wanted to ask you was, what are you seeing as far as sort of the titles of the people who are making these presentations to the CFO? Is this primarily a CIO role? Is it a CTO? Or is this out in the line of business, or some mix of all of these?
I would say it's some mix of all of these, and it really depends on the project. So if it's a full scale, ERP implementation, you're going to have your business unit leads. So, if HCM is involved, you're going to have the CHRO. You're going to have, top level IT management as well. And then functional areas in terms of, if finance is involved, you'll have, the finance team, typically CFO involved with those as well. And, to the point earlier about so many of these projects are interconnected internally. I feel like the evaluation team and the team that goes in to present the business case, sort of needs to be singing from the same hymnal as well. You typically are going to have a single point person for the project overall, but we see a mixture of all of these things depending on the scope of the project, and ultimately it's a single person who sort of takes the lead and hangs there, is going to be responsible for the overall success.
Yeah. So you're the expert on this, and you deal with lots and lots of clients and partners on these things. I just had the impression as an outsider, if I'm the CFO sitting there and people come in and it's from 2 or 3 functional areas where maybe one person's driving it, but the other people that are saying, I'm here to support so-and-so in her presentation because this is going to be so valuable to what I do. So not only listed within the proposal, but, having those people there, making the case and, putting your reputation and your ethos on the line there for those sort of projects. So fascinating dynamics there, Bonnie. And so we talked a little bit about it, but your third point, it's more than about you, or it's about more than you. How is the best way to convey that to a CFO?
So, as you look at the impacts of the project, so, at what level is, a function or your end employee going to be touching this particular project? In a lot of cases, let's say it's an HCM rollout, that's going to touch every employee within the company. And so I would get that granular as to say it is going to impact X amount of employees in these functions, in these global entities, et cetera. So sometimes you're going to do a project geographically. So, making sure to define that sort of scope box that says, it's going to be 10,000 employees in North America. The project is going to be run out of this department with this team and this, having this functional leader. So, sort of that like pyramid, right? So who's going to lead the project all the way down to, how is an end employee, the employee, the frontline employee going to be impacted by this particular project. And, I think what relates back to, return on investment and things like that is being able to say, okay, very tangibly, we are going to save, X amount of employees, let's just for rough numbers say 1 hour a week. And the average, hourly wage is like $50 an hour. So calculating that out. So what is the overall number of hours saved? How much does that translate to in, dollar costs? And then, potentially, where will that time be reallocated? Can that time be better than spent helping, in front of customers and things like that? And what does that time shift actually equal? So being able to take the impacts across the business and really doing some, it doesn't have to be super specific, calculations, but how can you turn those potential time savings into reallocation of effort that is ultimately going to lead to more sales, more customer engagement, those sort of top line growth areas that a CFO is even more concerned with than just saving money. Because these projects are going to be expensive, but what is it that you gain by all of these new efficiencies that help to redefine your business value, or increase your customer engagement? All of those things that are way more important to the business than the dollars and cents, because those are the top line growth areas that a CFO also cares very much about.
So, and Bonnie, understanding that each different proposal, right, and each different company situation is unique, but how important is it to include some of those top line issues, better engagement with customers, more revenue opportunities, better profit opportunities, as opposed to those things that are important, the efficiencies and, saving some nickels here and there, which is all great. But can you put a weight or a value on if you can have those things, but then if you can also talk about growth opportunities, customer engagement, customer experience, customer loyalty, how important is that?
Yeah, I would flip it to say that is more important than the actual, saving, nickels and dimes along the way, because those are the true strategic, growth opportunities for a business. And that's where the real opportunities are, to have a digital transformation, really make a difference. All it is just about, creating greater efficiencies. That's nice, but that's not going to grow the business. I hear, this phrase that we use a lot, approach every project with the idea of helping to solve a problem or achieve a goal. So don't sell the product or the service, or the project that you want to sell internally. But if you can look at the larger business issues, the larger business goals of the company, and then tie what you're looking to implement as a product or as the service internally, if you can tie those back to the business goals, I think you're on so much stronger footing than, we're gonna, cut 3 heads here and, save some paperwork on, on the other side of things. Again, the top line stuff is so much more, I think, enticing to a CFO than just saving money.
Yeah, I would throw out, this is an extremely ill-informed, uneducated opinion here, but I would say it's 5 times more important. to talk about that. Again,
Mhm.
nobody's diminishing the significance of the other things, but in these times, and the risk that the company takes when it says we'll commit this amount of people and time and energy to this project, which potentially takes it away from other things like that. It has to be something these days that gives you a forward-looking, new type of competitive advantage, new ways of doing things, new reasons for customers to believe I should put more of my money with this company. They're going in the places that I want and need them to go in. So it's almost, Bonnie, I think I'm sort of reading between the lines of what you're saying here. You Facts are important and you got to have your details right, but there's got to be in some ways an emotional appeal or an aspirational appeal to the CFO. We can make the company better and different and more valuable to customers by doing these things.
Without a doubt. And like anything else, I think the passion that you have for that project, especially if you're going to be the one actually leading the project, is going to be so evident to a decision maker, your CFO, CEO. And, I think the emotional connection that you have to the project and your ability to communicate that to the CFO is going to go a long way as well, because that shows that you're willing to put your reputation on the line for it, but that there's some enthusiasm that you have for this particular initiative. I don't think you can. I think you need that as well as all of a strong business case. Is that passion. I think the other thing is there's a fear of loss as well. So if you can define, if we do not do this project, here is what the potential downside could be in terms of, we lose market share, we lose customers, we have to, close different types of operations because we're not able to keep up. We're lagging behind our competitors who have a lot better, digital footprint. Whatever those things are, you need to sort of paint that side of the picture too, because there's a fear of loss that should tie into the equation as well. And if you can bring that up in some of the, the uncertainty that will occur if you don't do the project, I think that's important to illustrate as well.
Yeah, Bonnie, I think that's a great point, especially in light of today's times when success, it's not just success is fleeting, but opportunities are fleeting, right? I get the sense of, as you described it there, if we don't do this, we're going to lose the ability to make customers believe we can do X, Y, and Z. And they're not going to sit back and wait till you somehow rediscover that magic to do it. They're going to go to somebody else. And I think these days, once a company or a source, a supplier, a vendor falls off that number 1 or 2 list, it's not impossible to get back to the top, but it's incredibly hard. You sort of, by what you do and by what you don't do, you define yourself to the marketplace. And I think these days people are really, really sensitive to that. This is a can-do company. This is somebody, they're old fashioned. They couldn't make it. They couldn't get over the hump. They can't keep up with what I want and need. And that's really, really hard to overcome these days.
And it's not even going where your competitors are. You don't even, that's you don't want parity.
Yeah.
You want to be an innovator and a disruptor in your industry. And so it's not even just, getting at parity. You want to do something that's truly groundbreaking. And as you said, if you don't, not only are you falling behind your competitors, but you're going to become irrelevant.
Yeah. Yeah. We don't want to be mucking around like kids in the parity playground. We want to be on the, innovation moonshot here that's going to capture and retain customers for years to come. And Bonnie, then there's something too to that similar sort of passion and a little bit of storytelling that's woven into it with your 4th point about the power and the capability of some of the advanced technologies that get brought into the company and the business value that those can help create.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, so you have the software that is, your cloud software and things like that. But there's a level of innovation that is possible with artificial intelligence and RPA, machine learning, and things like that. That if you can tie in the use case for those advanced technologies into your business case, those are the type of things the CFO wants to be on the leading edge. Not just that they want something that has AI or machine learning in it, but how can you tie those advanced technologies into a specific use case for the business? I think that's where that, bringing the right technology to the table, that impact is going to be tenfold if you can marry all of the other things that we talked about, creating that strong business case along with, and here's the right technology and the right partner that's going to help us get there. I think that's kind of the nail in the coffin at the, in terms of locking up the business case for sure.
Yeah. Bonnie, you've put together some great ideas for how this rolls forward. Let me ask you if off the top of your head, can you mention a couple things that absolutely should not be, within a presentation like this? What is the CFO going to say? Time out, we're done here. Hit the road.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I would say focusing on the technology, starting with the product and working backwards into, and I think it's going to solve a problem that we have. So I would say that's number one. Number two, I would say that's going to be an automatic kick out is, if it doesn't clearly have a return on investment or more importantly, impact a larger business goal. And if it is seen as an expense, that's also going to be a quick kick out. I would say that's the second thing. And then number three is not having a project plan that seems viable. So if the project plan is too vague, or the team that is assembled doesn't seem like they're up to the task, then that also is going to create some real questions from a decision maker. So I would say, and related to that is, you don't want to be a lone wolf in terms of selling the concept. You want all of your strong voices internally to sort of be echoing and singing the praises of this particular project as well. And you, if you're going to be the project leader, you want other people helping to sell the concept, and sort of be your ambassadors at the same time. So don't be a lone wolf would be my last tip there.
No, Bonnie, they're great points. I think especially that last one. And, you don't want to be in a position where he's saying to the CFO, I haven't really talked about this with those other, but I'm sure they'll buy in, how could they not? How could they not? So it's clarity of purpose. Well, Bonnie, these are all wonderful ideas on a very, very important, vital subject these days. If anybody wants to contact you or your company to find out more about your feelings on this, how can somebody reach you?
I'm Bonnie at ravenintel.com. You can easily visit our site, ravenintel.com. I'd encourage you to do that if you're going to be embarking on a digital transformation project. We have free resources for you, and I'd be happy to help.
Well, Bonnie, that's great. Thank you so much. Good to see you, and always a pleasure to be with you here at Cloud Wars Live.
Thank you so much for having me.
And thanks to all of you folks for being with us here. Bonnie Tinder of Raven Intel will be back next month for another discussion of Tinder on customers. Thanks to everybody for being here. Enjoy the last couple weeks of summer. And we look forward to seeing you again soon here at Cloud Wars Live.